He wasn't supposed to live. Once a warrior molded for battle, now reduced to a man dragging himself through silence, he crawled across the burning sands of Canyon Hollow, a graveyard of wind and heat. His uniform hung in tatters, his breath shallow, his will splintering with every inch forward. Then came movement. 3 shapes gliding through the haze. Not men. Not angels. They were German shepherds, stray, scarred, gaunt with hunger but fierce with purpose. They approached him quietly, as if summoned by something older than mercy. One bit through the cords binding his wrists. Another stood watch, eyes scanning the horizon. The third pressed its muzzle to his wounds, gentle, deliberate, like it had known pain before and recognized its own reflection in him. No one sent them. No one claimed them. But on that sun-choked day, when both man and beast had been forsaken by the world, something divine stirred between them. Something beyond reason. Something even God didn't explain. And what happened after, it will undo you, and perhaps rebuild you. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you believe some dogs are heaven's soldiers, hit subscribe. Because this story, this one, isn't about commands or orders. It's about choosing to stay. The morning sun crept over the forgotten edges of Canyon Hollow, a lonely desert town lost in the southern winds of Colorado. The sky was pale and bleached, the air dry enough to sting. Heat shimmered across the broken asphalt and rusted road signs, clinging to the warped bones of empty diners and collapsed barns. A thin breeze stirred, dragging trails of dust along State Route 18, brushing past what was left of a gas station buried halfway in sand and time. By 8 o'clock, the light had hardened, bleaching the world, burning the color out of it. The shadows grew sharp, angular, like scars across the ground. Driving through that silence in a dented 1996 Dodge Ram, Sergeant Mason Dyer rolled down the window. The desert wind slapped against his sunburned face, raw and honest. He was 42. Built thick through the shoulders, carved more by struggle than gym work, a frame that looked like it had survived both war and weather. His hair, cropped short, had gone the color of dull iron. His beard, uneven and rough, grew out of neglect, not style. And his eyes, once a bright soldier's green, had dimmed to something closer to smoke. They weren't tired from age. They were tired from memory. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his jawline, shrapnel from a convoy blast in Helmand Province, 7 years ago. Mason hadn't smiled much since Kendra, his wife, had been killed in a robbery gone wrong outside Phoenix. That grief had done what war never could, it hollowed him out from the inside. Since then, he'd bounced from one temporary job to another, private security gigs, short-term contracts, training new recruits who never lasted long. Nothing fit. Nothing healed. So when Canyon County offered him a short patrol contract, just a simple perimeter check down south, he accepted. Not because he cared about duty anymore, but because it was something that still made sense. Something that kept his hands busy and his ghosts quiet. That morning, everything had started like routine. Checkpoints. Mileage logs. The same empty roads. He refused the department SUV. He didn't trust anything government issued anymore. In the passenger seat lay his gear, a flickering GPS unit, a standard Colt pistol he hadn't fired in years, a thermos of bitter coffee, and a manila folder labeled Southern Grid, Revised. The new patrol route had been handed to him earlier that morning by a nervous young intern, red hair, freckles, sweat darkening the pits of his county uniform. His name was Tyler May, barely 20, voice shaky when he explained, just a calibration update, sir. Routine map refresh. Mason didn't ask questions. He'd learned not to. The revised path led him off the main road and onto a gravel trail bordered by dry shrubs and rust-colored rock. He checked the GPS, it lost signal twice within 3 miles. That wasn't right. He tried the radio. Static. Tapped it again. Nothing. The truck dipped into a narrow gully and rolled out onto an abandoned wash, the kind littered with old tire ruts and sun-baked cans. Then, everything went white. There was no warning. One moment, he was checking his map. The next, something struck the back of his skull with brutal force. The cab exploded into sound and stars. When he came to, he was face down in the dirt, wrists zip-tied behind his back, blood caked across one cheek. Two men loomed over him, both masked. One was tall and wiry, walking with a limp. The other broad, his forearms inked with a serpent curling up toward his elbow. They didn't speak much. They just worked fast. They kicked his radio beneath the truck. Tossed his gun into the ravine. Then the bigger one pulled out a chain, heavy, rusted, and looped it tight around Mason's wrists before hooking it to the truck's undercarriage. The metal bit deep into old scar tissue. He grunted, but refused to scream. The tall one sneered. Did this truck ever save anybody? The chain jerked, hard enough to rip skin. Guess today it gets to be your coffin. Mason spat blood. You think I'm afraid of dying out here? The smaller one chuckled. You should be. No one's coming, Marine. No one gives a damn about dead war dogs in Canyon Hollow. They spray-painted something crude across the tailgate, words Mason couldn't see, but didn't need to. He'd been called worse before. After a final kick to the ribs, they left. A white SUV, roaring into the distance. The desert swallowed their dust. Time disintegrated. The sun climbed higher. His body began to betray him, sweat drying into salt, tongue sticking to the roof of his mouth. Every twitch against the chain carved deeper into his wrists. Eventually, he stopped trying. When he drifted, he saw Kendra's face, smiling faintly before fading. He heard the echoes of rotor blades, the rat-tat-tat of bullets striking metal, radios screaming for help that never came. The desert is not kind. But sometimes, it listens. Late in the afternoon, when the air began to cool, three shapes appeared on the ridge. At first, Mason thought they were hallucinations, mirages conjured by pain. Then the wind shifted. He smelled it, fur, dust, wildness. They were dogs. Not pets. Not strays in the ordinary sense. Creatures carved by hunger and survival. One was black and tan, eyes amber bright and sharp as a sniper's aim. Another smaller, sable, ribs visible beneath the coat, one ear torn. The third, brindled and gray, older, with scars running down its hind leg like a story no one had heard. They moved in formation, cautious but sure. The brindled one hung back, watching. The black and tan approached the chain, nose twitching. The sable circled the truck, tail stiff, steps deliberate. Mason couldn't move, could barely see. The world swam with heat and blood. The black and tan sniffed the chain, growled low, not at Mason, but at the metal. And before darkness pulled him under again, he felt the sable shepherd press its muzzle against the lynx, and bite. Not in anger. But in freedom. The wind shifted again after dusk. What had once been a furnace of dry heat turned to a breath of cold that slithered across the desert floor. The air of Canyon Hollow changed, thinner now, heavier with silence. The horizon burned with fading indigo as the last rim of sunlight disappeared behind the cliffs. Three shadows glided across the darkening ridge, not ghosts, but close enough. They moved with purpose and understanding, their paws whispering across the sand. Below them, beside a battered Dodge Ram, Sergeant Mason Dyer lay motionless. His cheek pressed against grit still warm from the day, his wrists bloodied and raw where the chain had bitten. His breathing was shallow, a rasp more than a rhythm. His body had long surrendered, but something faint, a pulse, fragile yet stubborn, kept flickering beneath the skin. The kind of pulse another creature might sense if it had ever known what it meant to be left behind. The black and tan shepherd was the first to approach, compact, muscular, deliberate. His ears were alert, nose twitching as he took in the man's scent. He stepped carefully, lowering his head beside Mason's. There was no bark. No sound. Just breath meeting breath. He sniffed the rusted chain, then Mason's arm. Blood. Salt. Metal. Alive. The smaller sable shepherd circled wider, restless, tail low, body trembling with alert energy. Its torn ear flicked each time the wind shifted. It was young, jittery, the kind of creature shaped by hunger and fear, yet still curious enough to come close. Somewhere, deep inside, it carried a memory, a faint echo of a girl's voice whispering through a wooden fence long ago. A girl who had once called it, "good boy," before being taken away. The brindled one, larger and older, stood apart. His coat was dust gray, his flank marked with old scars. One hind leg dragged slightly, a limp earned years ago from a barbed wire snare. His gaze swept the ridge, the horizon, the shifting dark. He knew this stillness, it was the kind that came before danger. No collars. No names. No master's call. Yet in Canyon Hollow, people had spoken of them for years. Locals called them the Three. Some said they haunted the abandoned church at the town's edge, sleeping beneath the fallen steeple. Others swore they lingered near the sawmill ruins, guarding the shadows. Ranchers muttered that they appeared during calving season to chase away coyotes, then vanished. A drunk once called them spirits. A preacher called them angels. No one ever got close. Until now. The Black and Tan placed a paw beside Mason's face, cracked, calloused, steady. He nudged the man's ear once, a gentle breath that carried more concern than instinct. When Mason didn't stir, the sable one crept closer. Slowly, tenderly, it began licking the dried blood from his temple. The motion was soft, rhythmic, not frantic, not feeding, more like a vow whispered through action. Mason twitched. A faint sound escaped his throat, a groan, low and human. The brindled dog turned its head east. Something shifted in the air, the kind of silence that pressed against the skin. Not the peace of nightfall, but the hush before something unseen. He sniffed, gasoline, motor oil, but no fresh scent. The danger had passed. He limped forward and nosed the chain. Mason's fingers jerked slightly. That was enough. The Black and Tan lowered his jaw around the rusted link and bit down. Teeth scraped, metal groaned, the sound cutting through the still air. Then, with a sudden crack, the link snapped. Mason gasped, a hoarse cry torn from his chest as the tension released. His body slumped sideways, arms falling limp. The sable pressed its head against his ribs as if checking for life. The brindled one swept his flank along Mason's back, supporting him upright. They didn't move like scavengers. They moved like soldiers. A unit. Instinct fused with memory, as though some echo of discipline still lingered in their bones. Far across the valley, headlights glimmered faintly, a single truck winding home along the highway. Jerome Carrion, 63, drove with both hands gripping the wheel, one leg stiff from an old factory accident. A retired mechanic who spent his nights delivering water to border checkpoints, Jerome knew every crack in this desert. He had seen the dogs once, 2 winters ago, standing on the ridge like sentinels carved from stone. One limped. One had a torn ear. One simply stared at him with eyes that felt older than the world itself. Jerome had told the story at the diner later that night. People laughed. But the next morning, someone had carved the words, "The watchdogs are real," into the church door. No one erased it. Now, Mason Dyer, beaten, broken, half dead, had become the first human they'd ever chosen to help. The sable sniffed the air again and gave a low growl, barely a vibration. The brindled followed its gaze. Far off, a dust cloud shimmered. Headlights again, maybe a truck, maybe rescue. The Black and Tan eased down beside Mason, pressing his side against the man's body for warmth. No orders. No master. No words. Only the choice, to stay. Night bled fully over Canyon Hollow, deep and soundless, painted in bruised blue. The desert wind carried bits of dry yucca and brittle brush bones across the sand. Beyond the last flicker of the town street lamps, everything was void and still, except for the crunch of paws and the dragging whisper of boots. Mason floated between worlds, half dreaming, half conscious. His body moved, but not by his own power. He was being carried. Not by men or machines, but by 3 dogs who had never known obedience, only endurance. The black and tan bore most of his weight across its shoulders. It didn't whine, didn't slow. Behind it, the sable darted around to nudge Mason's legs back into place whenever they slipped. The brindled elder followed behind, eyes locked on every shadow, ready for anything that dared to approach. They crossed a dry creek bed where the stones were sharp and cruel, yet none faltered. Their path wound through shallow gullies, between brush and rock, routes where only coyotes and ghosts wandered. Somehow, they knew exactly where to go. Miles away, the faint hum of electricity buzzed in the night, Canyon Hollow Medical Outpost, a squat teal building clinging to the edge of town. Its hallways smelled like bleach, stale coffee, and weariness. Inside, Kate Leary, 35, stood before a bank of outdated thermal monitors. A former ER nurse from Cheyenne, Kate's eyes carried the kind of exhaustion that never really slept. Her scrubs hung loose, her hair was frizzed into a messy bun held by determination alone. She liked the night shift. It was quieter. Quieter than Denver, where 4 years ago, during a flash flood, she'd lost a 5-year-old girl named Darla when a triage tent collapsed. No one had blamed her. But she'd never forgiven herself. Tonight, though, something stirred her from habit. A flicker, faint, red, alive, appeared on the screen labeled Unit 3 Delta, a thermal camera that hadn't worked properly in months. Kate frowned and leaned closer. The image glowed, one humanoid figure, surrounded by smaller heat signatures. Not elk. Too deliberate. Too organized. She switched to another feed, a half-broken camera mounted on a wildfire tower. The image wavered but came through clear enough. A man, injured, slumped, being carried. By dogs. 3 of them. She froze. What in God's name? Her coffee spilled unnoticed across her clipboard. She snatched up her radio, thumb pressing the call button hard. Dispatch, this is Nurse Leary at Canyon Hollow Outpost. I've got possible civilian movement on Ridge Base, repeat, human subject accompanied by 3 animals. Requesting emergency response clearance, Sector 4. Static. Then a confused voice. Assistance. Did you say animals? German shepherds, she said sharply. 3. Possibly wild. I'm assembling a team. Tell Parks we'll use the ATVs. Before the reply came, she clicked off. Downstairs, she found Bennett Rios, the on-call paramedic, wiry, tattooed, buzz-cut, eyes quick but kind. When she told him what she'd seen, he blinked once, grabbed his trauma kit, and said simply. Let's go meet the ghost dogs. They loaded the ATVs, headlights slicing through the night. The farther they rode, the quieter the world became. Eventually, the trail narrowed and they continued on foot. Gravel crunched beneath their boots. The desert swallowed their voices. Then, just beyond a rise of sandstone, they saw them. A man lay half-slumped across the back of a black and tan shepherd. The other 2 stood guard, still and silent, as if carved from the earth itself. The sable growled when the lights hit them but didn't lunge. The brindle didn't even blink. Kate raised her hands, palms open. It's okay, she whispered. We're here to help. The black and tan turned his head and nudged something forward, a small metal rectangle glinting in the sand. Kate knelt. Picked it up. Military ID. Dyer, Mason R. Sergeant, United States Marine Corps. Bennett exhaled. He's one of ours. They lifted Mason carefully onto the collapsible gurney. As they did, his cracked lips moved. Don't, leave them, he rasped. Kate touched his forehead. We won't. They're coming too. And they did, silent as smoke, following the paramedics all the way back through the dunes toward the glowing lights of the outpost. 3 ghosts. 3 guardians. 3 who chose to stay. Morning rose slowly over Canyon Hollow, spilling soft gold across the cliffs and stirring faint life from the desert floor. A rare coolness lingered, fragile, fleeting, brushing the cracked windows of the Canyon Hollow medical outpost where machines hummed faintly and the scent of antiseptic clung to the air like memory. Inside room 3B, beneath crisp white sheets, Sergeant Mason Dyer stirred. His breath was shallow, steady. His wrist was bound in a molded splint, gauze wrapped thick beneath it. One arm hung in a sling, the other rested on his chest. The dull ache behind his eyes felt like the echo of fire. He blinked against the brightness, the world swimming into focus, ceiling tiles, and 4 bag, the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. And then it hit him, a flood of broken flashes, the desert, the chain, the smell of hot metal, and the sound of paws against gravel. His throat was dry, his voice barely a whisper. The dogs, where are they? Across the room, Kate Leary looked up from a clipboard. Her scrubs were rumpled from the night before, her bun now a halo of loose curls, dark circles painted under her eyes. A half-empty styrofoam cup balanced on her knee. They're here, she said softly. Haven't moved since we brought you in. He frowned, his mind sluggish. She stood and walked toward the narrow interior window that looked out into the hallway. With 2 fingers, she nudged the blinds aside. They've been there the whole time. Mason turned his head, slow, stiff, and there they were. Lying on the cold linoleum outside his door. The black and tan shepherd, head flat on his paws, eyes half-lidded but awake. The sable one, curled by the radiator, one ear flicking at each sound. And the brindled elder, sitting tall against the wall like a sentry carved from stone. Not one barked. Not one moved. They just waited. They didn't follow the sirens, Kate continued. Didn't touch the food we set down. They just stayed. Mason's throat tightened. Why? Kate shrugged, eyes soft. Some dogs stay because they're told. Others because they choose. A knock broke the silence. The door opened and in stepped a boy, 9, maybe 10, jeans dusty, a tattered baseball cap tilted backward, a notebook tucked under one arm. His name was Cody Mears, son of the outpost's maintenance supervisor. He was a fixture around the clinic, always underfoot after school, sketching things in the corners of hallways, birds, trucks, sometimes faces. And lately, dogs. Can I come in? He asked, voice hesitant but curious. Kate smiled. Just for a minute. Mason, this is Cody. Cody, Sergeant Dyer. Mason gave a faint nod. The boy stepped closer, his eyes darting from the 4 lines to the man's bandaged wrist. You know they've got names now, right? Cody said matter-of-factly. Mason raised an eyebrow. They do. Yeah. Cody opened his notebook, flipping to a page filled with pencil sketches, rough but full of life. I named them. He pointed at the drawing of the black and tan. That one's Ash, like ashes from a fire. He's the leader. He turned the page. The old brindled one, that's Bran. Slow, but smart. Like the stories my grandpa tells. Then the sable. And that's Delta. She's fast, but always looks like she's gonna run. Only, she never does. Kate chuckled softly. He's been campaigning to make those names official. They already are, Cody said proudly. Everyone in the clinic calls them that now. Mason watched the boy for a long moment, then murmured under his breath. Ash. Bran. Delta. The name sat heavy on his tongue, part code, part prayer. Kate handed him a cup of water. You've been out for 2 days. Severe dehydration, mild infection, and a concussion. You're lucky. Mason took a sip, slow, painful, but grounding. The chain. Removed, she said. Tendons bruised, but not torn. You'll get movement back with therapy. He nodded faintly, then asked, did they find my truck? Kate exchanged a look with Cody. Sheriff's department brought it in yesterday. Paint scrubbed, no prints. No cameras near Ridgeway Bluff. Mason's jaw tightened. He exhaled through his nose, thin and sharp. Cody tapped on the glass separating them from the hull. All 3 dogs lifted their heads immediately. Ash stood first, posture solid and steady. Delta stretched, silent as smoke. Bran simply watched, eyes locked on Mason like he was reading him. They don't bark, Cody said softly. But if someone new comes down the hall, Ash steps in front of your door every time. A ghost of a smile touched Mason's lips. Not bad for strays. Cody's voice dropped to a whisper. They're not just strays. They're the strays who stay. Kate blinked. You came up with that? No. That's what people are calling them now. He grinned shyly. Said they used to live out near the church ruins, been seen for years. But they never came close to anyone, until you. Mason's gaze softened. He turned toward the hallway window again, where the 3 shadows still stood their quiet vigil. I didn't save them, he said. No, Kate replied, her voice barely above a breath. They saved you. The air outside grew drier in the days that followed, the kind of stillness that makes even shadows look suspicious. Inside the outpost, Mason spent his recovery hunched over a worn cardboard box of old files. His left arm still in a splint, his right hand steady. His fatigue uniform hung loose on his shoulders, faded, but familiar. Something in his chest hadn't settled. Not even with Ash sleeping by the bed, or Cody's laughter echoing faintly from the hall. The unease had teeth. He spread an old map across the table, the Northern Patrol grid, and next to it, the newly revised route from the digital archives. At first glance, they looked identical. Then he saw it, a single service road missing from the updated version. The same road where he'd been ambushed. He squinted at the signature on the revision, D. Pembroke. He remembered that name. Pembroke had retired 3 years ago. He flipped open the old report file. The handwriting, strong, looping, didn't match. Someone had forged the name. Mason leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. Ash stirred at his feet but didn't lift his head. A name surfaced in his mind, one he hadn't wanted to think about. Leon Mays. Leon had been a technician, quiet and awkward, always fiddling with data cables and chewing sunflower seeds. He'd worked comms during Mason's contract days at the outpost, a loyal, if skittish, man. Mason's memory replayed an old fire at the fuel depot years earlier, flames roaring, propane tanks popping, men running for cover. Leon had been pinned under steel debris, leg broken, panic flooding his eyes. Mason had gone back for him, dragging him 30 feet before the tanks ignited. Leon had cried that night, not from fear, but from gratitude. You saved my life, he'd said. I owe you forever. And now, staring at a falsified map signed under Leon's clearance level, Mason felt his stomach turn. The betrayal wasn't abstract anymore. It had a face. Evening settled like smoke over Canyon Hollow. The clinic lights buzzed softly, humming beneath the dying hum of the desert wind. Inside, the air smelled faintly of alcohol wipes and rusted vents. Mason Dyer sat alone in the back office, a thin sheen of sweat gathering at his temples. His left wrist still throbbed under its bandages, but his mind was sharper now, focused. On the desk before him lay 2 maps, the original patrol schematic and the forged revision that had led him straight into an ambush. His gut tightened. This wasn't chance. Someone had wanted him isolated. Ash, curled by the door, raised his head and gave a low huff, not a warning, just awareness. Mason reached down, brushing his fur absently. "Yeah, boy," he muttered. "I smell it too." He turned back to the papers. The falsified file carried the digital stamp of Leon Mays, the same technician whose life he'd once dragged out of fire. Leon, who had sworn loyalty like it meant something. But this was betrayal written in code. Mason logged into the base's internal system using an old access key he'd memorized from his contract days. The terminal flickered, the screen bleeding green across his reflection. He typed in Mays's old login credentials, half-guessing from memory, a half-joke password Leon had once bragged about over burnt coffee. It worked. Folders spilled open. Logs, updates, patrol data. Then, one file caught his eye, route restructure request, May 3rd. It was timestamped 23:14. Hours after normal duty. Leon had logged it himself, removing the exact route through Ridgeway Bluff where Mason's GPS had gone dead. No reason listed. No authorization chain. Mason's pulse steadied, his anger cooling into calculation. He scrolled further and found another log, 4 days later. Location data upload. Secure channel. The destination wasn't the sheriff's office or the patrol HQ. It was an unlisted endpoint, no name, just a port code. Mason scribbled it down on the corner of the map, folded it twice, and slipped it into his pocket. He stood. Ash rose with him. "We've got something," Mason said quietly. Inside the clinic break room, Kate Leary was reviewing patient reports when Mason walked in, holding the printout in his good hand. "You shouldn't be up," she said, setting her tablet aside. "I need to ask you something," Mason said. His voice was even, but there was weight beneath it. Kate frowned. "Go on. Does Leon Mays still have system clearance?" She pulled up the staff registry on her screen. After a few seconds, she nodded slowly. "Not active, but, yeah. He still has partial access. Maintenance archives, communication backups." "Why?" Mason laid the paper down in front of her. "Because he lured me out there. Someone forged a map under his ID and sent it straight to me." Kate's eyes scanned the document, widening slightly. "But why would he?" "I don't know," Mason interrupted. "But whoever he's tied to wanted me dead." She inhaled sharply, her mind catching up. "You think this goes higher?" Mason didn't need to answer. The name was already hanging between them, unspoken but heavy. Royce Maddox. The ex-sheriff. The man who once ruled Canyon Hollow with a handshake and a threat. Years ago, rumors had swirled about his backdoor deals, shipments that vanished, false reports, people who disappeared. Nothing ever stuck. He'd walked away untouched. But now, maybe, there was proof. Leon was close to him, Kate whispered. Used to call him Old Man M. Said he was the only reason this town still had a pulse. Mason's eyes hardened. Then I guess we know whose orders he's still following. He folded the file and straightened, jaw tight. It's not over, Kate. Not yet. That night, Canyon Hollow sank into a deeper darkness. No stars, no moon, just a sheet of black pressing down over the town. Inside the medical station, the fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, then died with a soft, electrical sigh. The air conditioner sputtered, then went silent. Kate froze at the nurse's station, pen stilling midair. The hum of machines vanished. Even the heart monitor in room 3B blinked once, then went black. Generators didn't kick in, she whispered to herself, voice thin. In the dark, something primal stirred in Mason, a soldier's instinct honed by years of listening for the wrong kind of silence. He pushed himself upright, ignoring the pain that shot through his arm. Ash was already on his feet, body low, muscles tight. Delta sat near the window, nose pointed toward the door, trembling not from fear but focus. Bran stood still, facing the hallway, a statue of patience and warning. Then came the first sound. Glass breaking. Soft, deliberate. A door opened. Hinges groaned. Kate reached Mason's door just as he swung his legs over the bed. "We're being breached," he whispered. She didn't ask how he knew. 3 shadows moved in the outer corridor, dark, lean, efficient. Each wore masks. One held a silenced pistol, another a hunting knife, and the third carried a small black case. They didn't stumble. They knew the layout. Kate backed into Mason's room, locking the door. "Stay behind the bed," she hissed. "I'll try to call for help." Mason yanked open the bedside drawer. Beneath the bandages and gauze lay his unloaded sidearm. He wrapped his hand around it, more out of instinct than strategy. Bran growled, low, guttural, controlled. Ash's ears flicked. Delta's tail went still. Then, the door slammed open. The first intruder raised his pistol. Ash moved first. He exploded from the shadows, a blur of muscle and fury, teeth finding flesh before the man could react. The gun fired once, muffled, sparking against the wall. Delta launched next, colliding with the second man, clamping her jaws around his forearm until the knife clattered away. Bran didn't leap. He stood firm in front of Mason, hackles high, snarling a warning that froze the third attacker in place. The room erupted into chaos, flashing steel, shouts, blood. Kate ducked under the bed, reaching for the emergency comm switch mounted beneath. Her fingers found it and flipped it. A faint red light blinked alive in the back office. Signal sent. The third man lunged. Mason swung the pistol like a hammer, striking his wrist. The weapon fell. He rolled behind the cart, grabbed the dropped gun, and fired once, not at them, but upward. The bullet shattered the fluorescent casing above. Light burst, glass rained down. Ash yelped as a blow glanced his flank. He stumbled but didn't fall. He turned, growled deep, and lunged again, dragging the shooter backward into the hall. Ash. Delta. Bran. Hold positions. Mason barked. It sounded absurd, giving commands like they were trained soldiers, but the dogs obeyed. Delta backed toward the bed, shielding Kate. Bran stood at the window, guarding Mason's flank. Ash, blood streaking his side, refused to retreat. From the hallway came the thundering of boots, the clinic's backup team, 3 volunteers and an off-duty deputy, charging toward the commotion. The attackers hesitated, then turned to run. Delta lunged, grabbing a pant leg and pulling the last man down. He kicked free, limped, and vanished into the dark. Silence followed, sharp and ringing. Kate crawled out, her hands trembling as she pressed them against Ash's wound. "You need stitches," she whispered. He licked her hand once, calm, steady. The deputy secured the corridor. The backup power flickered on, flooding the hallway with ghostly light. Mason handed the pistol over, breathing hard. Then, at last, he sat down. Bran took his place by the window. Delta lay across the doorway, unmovable. Ash, bleeding but defiant, rested his head against Mason's knee. "They stayed," Kate whispered. "They didn't run." Mason looked at her. "Neither did you." Silence filled the room, not fear, not shock, but something deeper. Respect. The desert didn't sleep after the attack. By dawn, the wind had sharpened, carrying the scent of burned wiring and dried blood through the cracks of the Canyon Hollow medical station. The clinic stood quiet now, patched, locked, guarded. But for Mason Dyer, rest had no place left to hide. He sat by the window, left wrist bound tight, right arm steady as he cleaned his sidearm piece by piece. Ash lay at his feet, stitched but awake, head resting on Mason's boot. Bran kept his post near the hallway, watching every shadow that passed, and Delta dozed beside the radiator, ears twitching even in sleep. Outside, the horizon burned gold and pink, a cruel contrast to the bruised quiet inside. Kate Leray stood in the doorway, arms folded. "You should still be in bed." Mason didn't look up. "Beds are for people who stop fighting." She sighed softly, stepping closer. "You think last night was about you?" He loaded the last round into his magazine. "It was a cleanup." "Of what?" He set the gun down, eyes distant. "Evidence." Kate frowned. "You found something, didn't you?" Mason reached into his fatigues and unfolded the paper scrap he'd hidden, the port code from Leon Mays's falsified log. "Whoever's pulling strings isn't finished." "But they made a mistake." Kate leaned in. "You think Leon's still alive?" "I think he's hiding." Her face paled slightly. "And you're going after him?" He looked at her, voice level but cold. "He led me to that wash, Kate. Left me chained to die. I'm not sitting here while others decide what version of the truth gets filed." She shook her head. "You can barely move your arm." "Then I'll take help that doesn't need orders." He nodded toward the three dogs. Kate stared at them, Ash, Bran, and Delta, their gazes fixed on Mason like they already knew. "You're serious?" He stood, holstered the gun, and said, "Dead serious." By dusk, Mason was miles out, his old truck groaning along the cracked gravel roads beyond Ridgeway Bluff. The air had cooled, the sun dropping behind the mesa in a blaze of red and violet. The land here felt older, untouched, the kind of place where sound didn't carry and men could vanish without leaving dust behind. The USB drive recovered from the wreckage, half melted, found under the bed after the attack, had given him coordinates. Kate had managed to recover fragments from it, half a voice log, some corrupt files, and a radio echo buried deep in static. A single voice had come through, distorted but recognizable. Leon Mays. Now, as Mason followed the trail through the canyon, Ash rode in the passenger seat, head out the window, ears cutting through the wind. Bran sat upright in the truck bed, gaze locked on the fading trail behind them. Delta's silhouette flickered in the rearview mirror, restless, scanning the desert. The truck rolled to a stop near a cluster of juniper trees half swallowed by the slope. The GPS was useless here. But the tracks in the sand, faint boot prints, a crushed ration packet, told him enough. He climbed out quietly. "Stay sharp," he whispered. The dogs spread out instantly, each taking their position, Ash to the front, Bran to the left, Delta circling the ridge. They moved as if guided by something unseen, no words needed. A narrow crack in the hillside caught Mason's eye. A cave entrance, barely visible, half covered in thorny brush. He crouched low, hand brushing the rock, and called softly into the dark. "Leon." Silence. "It's me, Mason." A metallic rattle came from inside, a gun being shifted, maybe, or just nerves coming undone. Then a shadow moved within the cave mouth. Leon Mays stumbled forward. He looked like a ghost of the man Mason once knew, gaunt, unshaven, eyes bloodshot and ringed with grime. His shirt clung to him in tatters, sweat and dust streaking his skin. A rusted revolver shook in his trembling hand. Around his neck hung a USB drive strung on paracord, like a confession worn too long. "You came," Leon croaked, voice cracking. "Didn't think you would." Mason didn't raise his weapon. He didn't move closer either. "I should have left you out there," he said quietly. Leon's mouth twitched, halfway to a smile, halfway to breaking. "I didn't mean for them to kill you. I just did what I was told." "By who?" Leon swallowed hard. Maddox. Royce Maddox. Mason said nothing. The name alone made the air colder. Leon lowered his gaze. He said if I didn't adjust the routes, someone else would. I thought maybe you'd just get lost, lose signal, not that they'd finish you. His voice shook. I swear I didn't know. Mason's face didn't change. He let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Leon's words came faster now, tumbling over one another. He said I owed him. That no one would believe me after the fire, that you were just another Marine turned mercenary. He made it sound like it was just logistics, Mason. Just numbers. I didn't know what he was hiding. He reached for the USB drive hanging at his throat, held it out with shaking fingers. There's proof on here. Transaction records, voice logs, smuggling routes. Maddox has been running illegal shipments through old patrol paths, routes only I could edit. Ash stepped forward then, silent, imposing. Leon tensed, but the shepherd didn't attack. He sniffed the air once, then sat down, steady and unmoving, eyes fixed on him. Leon exhaled shakily. Guess even they know what I deserve. Mason took the USB and slipped it into his pocket. You don't deserve mercy, he said flatly. But you do deserve the truth, same as him. He turned toward the horizon where the desert bled into twilight. You're coming with me. Leon blinked, confused. To Maddox. To end this, Mason said. Leon looked down at the revolver in his hand, then slowly placed it on the ground. The sound of it hitting the rock echoed like a verdict. I never wanted this, Leon whispered. Neither did I, Mason replied. They stood there for a long time, two men bound by a promise twisted into betrayal. The wind moved softly through the canyon, carrying the faint scent of sage and rust. Bran appeared at the cave mouth, head cocked, eyes locked on Mason. It was time. That night, under a moonless sky, Royce Maddox made his final mistake. The former sheriff, once the law, now a stain, had packed a duffel bag and a burner phone, planning to disappear west beyond the abandoned rail depot. He never made it. Delta spotted him first, her low growl slicing through the dark. By the time he reached the tracks, Ash was already there, stepping out of the shadows, teeth bared but not striking. He bit into Maddox's sleeve, pinning him against the gravel. Bran circled slowly, his stance cold and deliberate, as if passing judgment. Then Mason appeared, flashlight in one hand, pistol in the other. Maddox sneered. You think this changes anything, Sergeant? Mason holstered the gun. No, he said quietly. But it ends something. Delta barked once, sharp and final, the sound echoing across the empty yard like a gavel. By sunrise, Royce Maddox was in custody. The next morning, Canyon Hollow woke under a sky painted with the pale coral of promise. The air tasted cleaner somehow, as if the desert itself was finally exhaling. At the town's civic hall, folding chairs lined up in crooked rows. Ranchers in sun-creased denim stood beside teachers and children dressed in their Sunday best. A small banner hung crooked over the podium. In honor of courage, Sergeant Mason Dyer. The mayor, Howard Lyle, stood sweating behind the microphone, voice thick with rehearsed pride. Today we honor a man who didn't just survive betrayal, he exposed it. The crowd clapped politely, a few cheers from the back. But Mason's eyes weren't on the audience. They were on the hill beyond the clinic, where three silhouettes sat watching. Ash, his muzzle streaked with gray but eyes still fierce. Bran, unblinking, sentinel of the ridge. Delta, alert and poised, every inch of her ready. When the mayor handed Mason the Desert Star commendation, Mason didn't take it. I'm grateful, he said, voice calm. But I didn't do this alone. And I didn't do it for medals. A murmur rippled through the room. I'm not leaving Canyon Hollow, he continued. There's work still to do, and I've got a team. Outside, through the window, the crowd caught sight of the three dogs sitting proud and still, and someone whispered, "The strays who stay." The ceremony ended quietly. The applause faded, the folding chairs creaked shut, and Canyon Hollow slipped back into its usual hush, the kind that carried more truth than words ever could. Inside the old firehouse behind the sheriff's office, Mason Dyer stood before a whiteboard filled with scrawled diagrams, patrol routes, comm relay zones, maps layered with red markings. But the centerpiece wasn't the logistics. It was a name. Echo K9 Recon Unit. Kate Leray leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, still in her green scrubs. "You're actually doing this?" Mason turned, half smiling. "Not a K9 program. Not the kind the military ran. This'll be different." She tilted her head. "You mean the part where your partners don't take orders?" "They're not trained," Mason said. "They're survivors. Same as us. We don't own them. We work with them." A low chuckle came from the corner, where Wade Collins, a broad-shouldered mechanic and former artillery sergeant, leaned over the table, grease still under his fingernails. "You think they'll listen to you without leashes?" Wade asked. "They already have," Mason said simply. Kate shook her head but smiled anyway. "You really believe this'll work?" "I don't have to believe," Mason replied. "I've seen it." Over the next several days, the Echo unit took shape, not through recruitment, but through word of mouth. Locals volunteered what they could. Wade scouted the canyons on his dirt bike. Kate set up a medical bay inside the old firehouse. And when the council hesitated, mumbling about feral dogs and liability, Mason didn't argue. He just pointed to the clinic. The three shepherds stood there again, this time wearing hand-stitched vests labeled Echo 1 to 23. Ash. Bran. Delta. Watching the town like they'd never left. After that, no one said another word. Then came the night of their release. The agreement with Animal Services was simple: the dogs would be allowed to return to the wild, free of ownership, their autonomy protected by law. Mason drove them out past the western bluff, where the desert deepened and the wind turned cold. No fences. No houses. Just open ground. He knelt in the sand, his hand resting on Ash's shoulder. "You're free now," he whispered. The words caught in his throat. He stepped back, hands open. Ash turned first, ears twitching toward the wind. Bran followed, slower, proud, the elder whose silence spoke more than any bark. Delta lingered the longest, her eyes fixed on Mason, uncertain. Then she ran, catching up to the others as they vanished into the folds of the desert. Kate was waiting in the jeep when Mason returned. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded, voice low. It was the right thing. The next morning, just after sunrise, a little girl no older than 7 tugged at her mother's coat outside the Canyon Hollow clinic. "Mom," she whispered, pointing at the steps. They came back. And there they were. Ash, curled near the bottom stair, tail flicking lazily. Bran, sitting by the ramp, his head high, watching the road. Delta, poised beside the clinic door, regal and still, as if she'd been waiting all night. "They don't need orders," the girl said softly. "I think they just know who's worth staying for." Her mother, Linda, one of the nurses who once feared strays, didn't answer. She just stared, awe written across her face. A few days later, dust rolled across the border road in slow, whispering waves. A military green jeep rumbled along the gravel. Mason sat behind the wheel, uniform faded, eyes calm. He wasn't leaving Canyon Hollow. He was patrolling. On either side of him, 3 shadows ran, paws hitting the earth in perfect rhythm. Ash, limping slightly, his wound healed to a scar. Bran, silent and watchful, scanning every ridge. Delta, fast and alert, leading from just ahead. They didn't need commands. They didn't wait for cues. They just knew. Man and dog, broken things made whole again by trust. The horizon stretched wide and endless before them, painted in the light of a new morning. And for the first time in years, Mason felt something close to peace. Because sometimes miracles don't crash through thunder or come wrapped in glory. Sometimes they arrive quietly, on four legs, with tired eyes and unshakable loyalty. In a world that forgets the broken and abandons the lost, 3 strays had chosen to stay. To guard. To believe. Not because someone told them to. But because love, the real kind, doesn't wait for instructions. So if this story touched your heart, don't scroll past. Type Amen in the comments below. Share it with someone who's forgotten what faith looks like. And remember. Sometimes the smallest miracles don't bark, or speak, or shine. Sometimes, they just walk beside you when no one else will. May God bless you wherever you are. And may you never overlook the quiet miracles that choose to stay.